Hello and welcome to the Tavern Chat podcast. I'm your host, Eric Tenkar, and this is another in our series of designer and makers fireside chats. This time we have Alex Macris, the main man behind Autarch. If you've ever played Adventure Conqueror King system, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Alex, thank you for joining me today.
Thank you for having me.
So, I'm going to hit you with a few questions that I ask of everybody.
Okay, I'm ready.
And all right, tell us about your first RPG experience.
My first RPG experience was the Dungeons and Dragons coloring book by Gary Gygax. I had an older brother who was 9 years older than me, and he was a teenager at the moment when Dungeons and Dragons hit its stratospheric popularity in the very early 80s, you know, when they were playing Dungeons and Dragons during the E.T. movie, etc. And so he got very into it, and he thought I would like it. And he bought me, I was maybe 6 years old at that point, bought me the Dungeons and Dragons coloring book, and I thought that was amazing and played it. And shortly thereafter, I started playing with my brother. And my very first character was a thief with strength of 7 who died to a white dragon. So there you go.
That is par for the course, I think, for a lot of those early sessions. It's probably the OSR doesn't worry about game balance, right?
That's right.
You learn from an early age that discretion is a better part of valor.
Actually, I have historically died in every campaign I've ever played in. I have never had a character survive. So, in fact, I would say I have still not learned that discretion is the better part of valor. At this point, it's an ongoing joke as to how I will gloriously die in each campaign.
Well, all right. So long as it's a glorious death.
It usually is. I usually avoid going out like a chump, but I definitely die.
Nice. Alrighty. What is your, and again, I'm pretty sure I know the answer to this, but what is your go-to RPG system and why?
Well, nowadays it's Adventure Conquer King system. Prior to creating ACKS, I would say my two favorite games were classic Dungeons and Dragons. So that is the Moldvay Cook Menser versions of Dungeons and Dragons.
Okay.
And then R. Talsorian Cyberpunk 2020 is another one of my long-standing favorites. And then, you know, a series of other peripheral games. But I would say 50% of all campaigns I've ever run in my life have been within that space.
Well, that's I still have the Cyberpunk 2020 on my bookshelf. Never got a chance to run it. My group, it was a bit too off the mainstream of D&D or Traveler or Rifts.
Yep.
It was a bit more, and none of my friends were reading any of the cyber fiction at that time, the cyber science. Everybody was mostly reading fantasy, so even Traveler was a hard sell at point for me. So I'm impressed.
Sure. I was fortunate because I had I grew up in a town that was very gun friendly. So a lot of folks there were hunters or gun owners, and they were really into firearms. And Cyberpunk was very much kind of a firearms porn type game. And so I think that initially attracted a lot of attention for it. And you know, the players used to just sit there and salivate over, you know, 11 millimeter smart gun with extended magazine clip firing, dual purpose armor piercing hollow point flechette ammunition. You know, you're just like, okay. You know. That's like the equivalent of a +5 Holy Avenger to those guys.
Oh, damn. All right. Yeah, I was playing in New York City at the time. There was no gun ownership. There still isn't. All right. Race is class. Yay or nay?
I think that race and class should be integrated, but I don't think it necessarily needs to be that each race is only one class. So I don't like the mix and match of race with class because I think it tends to feed into a notion that if you want to play X class, you should be Y race, and if you don't do that, obviously you don't know how to play the game, or you don't know how to max out your character, and it's this very sort of 3.5 mentality. That said, I also have sympathy for the players who say, well, I don't want my elf to be an elven, fighter magic user. I'd like to be an elven enchanter, which is also a mythic archetype, and why can't I be that? So what I did in ACKS is for each race, I created a series of character classes that I thought represented the archetypes of that race. So for instance, for dwarves, you have the dwarven delver, you have the dwarven vault guard, you have the dwarven machinist, you have the dwarven craft priest, and you have the dwarven fury, which are respectively an explorer / thief type character, a fighter type character, a cleric type character, a berserker, and a character who creates automatons and machinery. And it's totally distinct from if you play an elf, where your choices are elven enchanter, elven courtier, elven nightblade, elven spellsword, elven ranger. And so, they also have a fighterish option, a spellcasterish option, et cetera, but it's a totally different set of options. It does create a little bit more page count because you have to have more classes, but I think the overall outcome is a lot better.
Oh, I totally agree. And when I came back to DMing after many years away from it, and this is after we did a play test, I didn't DM, thank God, of D&D Next at the time. I came back, and the first two campaign arcs I ran one using AD&D 1E, which is what I was comfortable with, and they take an Osric at the same time. And then once I finished that, and once I got a chance to read through ACKS, I ran ACKS because I liked the way you handled the classes, and I liked the way you handled character. I don't want to say character death because it doesn't necessarily mean character death in ACKS, but certainly character defeat on the battlefield, and we'll probably touch on that later. But yeah,
right, the mortal wounds and the tampering with mortality tables, sure.
Oh yeah, we'll definitely touch on that. Next
Did
question.
you use the proficiency system when you played ACKS in your campaign?
We did, but most of my players just kind of forgot they had them.
Right.
Yeah, and that's because I think even when we played back in the day, the AD&D 2E, where they brought in the non-weapon proficiencies, for the most part, we ignored them because we never were used to using them. I think now, if I ran ACKS with a regular group, I think that the proficiencies would get used more because I would probably set situations up that the proficiencies would come into play.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, one of the things we did was create the so-called adventuring proficiency, which every adventurer gets, and which covers all of the routine tasks that were that had rules in basic and expert D&D. So you could essentially ignore the proficiencies and just worry about the fact that everyone's an adventurer and you can just adventure. Or if you wanted to really delve deep, you can be like, well, in addition to being an adventurer, my character knows how to craft beer and brew potions or whatever.
Yeah, like I said, this was me coming, my first GMing, God, probably like 12 years at that point. I never fully left the hobby, but I certainly was like in hibernation. I hadn't had a chance to play because work hours and my initial group, when I was no longer available to GM back in March of '97, we had just stopped gaming, and a lot of it moved on to MMOs. We played EverQuest and stuff like that to keep the group together, but it wasn't the same. But once I found virtual tabletops, then things fell back into place. And but I enjoy running games. I enjoy playing them too.
See, I'm disappointed to hear this. I had this notion that you were secretly running a D&D group, out of the police station with like hardened cops who were investigating dungeons like they were crime scenes.
All right. I will give you a short story on that one. Shortly before I retired, I was a sergeant. I was working midnights. I was covering the desk for a bunch of investigators, and my lieutenant was talking to me, and I had brought in, I forget, it was probably the Swords and Wizardry rules one day to read at night. I mean, it's the midnights, it gets slow. And he's like, what's that, the Dungeons and Dragons stuff? I'm like, yeah. He goes, you play that? I go, yeah. He goes, yeah, I hear you got a blog too. I'm like, yeah, huh? He goes, what's the website? I'm like, I'm not telling you. He goes, what? I go, dude, I'm not telling you. I keep my work life and my social media life separate. There's work reasons for that, but I just felt it was safest. I come back. I swing out for 2 days. I come back and I get to my mailbox in our office area, and there is the dwarven face that I use for my Facebook image, printed out, full color, pasted, not even tape, pasted onto my mailbox. So I see my lieutenant. He goes, Tenkar. I'm like, yeah, Lou. He goes, man, you weren't easy to find. He goes, I had to jump through hoops to figure out where your social media was. I'm like, well, at least I know I hit it well enough for that. He goes, so would you be willing to run games? And I go, excuse me. He goes, we can get a couple of guys, get them on their meal break, and maybe tack on their personals, and we could get like an hour and a half together, maybe twice a week. Would you run it? I'm like, yeah, all right, sure. And Matt Finch was going to actually send some Swords and Wizardry rule books for me to distribute, and my lieutenant got transferred.
Oh.
And the new lieutenant coming in had no sense of humor whatsoever. So no, that's where it ended, but came very close to that one, very close. And I had a couple of detectives that were interested. So that close.
Yeah, that would have been really fun. The funniest experience I had like that is when I was working for Defy Media and traveling back and forth to LA all the time. I was spending half my week in airplanes, and one day I got in my seat, and I glanced around to see who my fellow passengers were, and across the aisle from me was this mid-40s guy in a business suit with chief executive officer hair, really expensive laptop, and I looked at what was on his laptop screen, and it was a copy of ACKS.
Oh my God!
Jaw just drops, and so I leaned over and I was like, "Excuse me, sir, are you looking at Adventurer Conqueror King System by Alexander Macris?" And he looks at me turns bright red, and he's like, "Yes, why?" And I'm like, "Well, because I'm Alexander Macris." And so we just start chatting it up, and it turns out the guy is a senior partner at McKinsey Consulting, and he has a gaming group of his McKinsey partners, and they play ACKS because they're it's the only RPG that really understands economics. If you care about economics, you have to play ACKS. Yeah. And I'm like, this is amazing. I found my niche, McKinsey Consultants.
That is awesome. See, now my playing experience was my first GaryCon. And I went, it was last moment. Frog Guy Games, they reached out to me and said, listen, if you can get out here, we got a hotel room for you. We want you to help work the table. I was like, all right. So that's fine. Had a great time at the con. Flying back, there's a problem. My plane gets delayed, 2 hours, but then I get booked on a prior plane going to New York that was delayed an hour and 45. So suddenly I'm flying earlier than I was going to prior. And I sit down next to a young woman, and I got, because that's the seat they give me now. And I'm like, okay. And she turns at me, she goes, I saw you at GaryCon. I'm like, oh, yeah. She goes, yeah. She goes, what do you do? I go, well, I wrote Swords and Wizardry Light, the 4 pages, and I didn't have it in my bag under my feet. It was now in the bag in the overhead. And she's like, no, you didn't. I'm like, yeah, no, I'm Eric Tenkar. She goes, no, you're not. I go, wait a minute, I'm not. She goes, I have this because I bought Frog Guy Game stuff. You're not Eric Tenkar. I go, listen, Tenkar's Tavern, the blog, that's me. She goes, Yeah, show me some ID. Well, I go, listen, the name I use because I was a cop, it's not going to match. So, but listen, when we get off the plane, if you want because she had a gaming group that ran out of a game store. I go, if you want copies of Swords of Light, I'm coming home with about 40 copies. I can give you like a dozen. We talked now just about the con. So she bought a lot of shit at the con. She had to wait for like a trunk of gaming books to come out from below. So I was like, Jesus. So I step out and I grab 12 copies and I come back and she looks at it, looks at me, she goes, holy shit, you were telling the truth. I'm like, who's gonna lie about this? Who else but me would want to be me? I was like, oh man. And then she gave me a hug and a peck on her cheek. It was very sweet. And I saw her the following year at Gary Con. She brought her husband over to introduce me to her husband. But I was just like, I can. Who else but you is going to admit first off that you're a gamer? And in a public space, it's almost like, oh my god. But yeah, I'm not claiming that I wrote anything all that great. It's a 4-page game I wrote, but yes, I wrote it, and you can have copies. But she didn't. I said she didn't believe it until I actually handed her the copies, and then she realized, oh my god. So yeah, I can relate. But that you finding businessmen that actually game, that's awesome, man.
It was pretty unexpected. I had been fortunate because my prior career was in the video game industry, and tabletop gamers grow on trees in the video game industry. So it was always really easy to get a big group. Like we regularly had groups of 8 to 12 people for a decade. But then when I shifted over into the media industry, the groups became a little scarcer. Although fortunately, I was able to get a group in Los Angeles. So I had a group in LA and a group in Raleigh, and I was shuttling back and forth between the two, running for both. It was pretty wild.
Damn, pretty nice. All right, we'll move on to our next question, and we're almost at the sandbox part. Where do you stand on save or die?
Well, personally, I try not to die. Do you mean do I think that you should be able to die instantly?
Yeah, the mechanic. I've heard arguments both ways. Actually, not even. There's multiple ways to argue this, but I'd like to see where you basically stand.
All right, sure. So my personal belief is that the risk of permanently dying in an RPG without your consent is an essential part of the game. I think that what makes the RPG as a pastime superior relative to other pastimes is the agency of the player. You can play an MMO and enjoy gameplay, you can read a book and enjoy a story, but there's only one genre of game that affords you absolute agency to do whatever you can think of and have that resolved. But for agency to be real, two things have to be the case. One, causality has to follow laws that you can understand. The same action repeated in the exact same circumstances should be resolved in the same way, fairly. And two, the consequences of your choices have to actually matter. And I think when you take that into account, you understand why railroading is bad, you understand why fudging is bad, and you understand why save versus die can be good. Now, it isn't always good because it's possible to do save versus die in ways that remove player agency. But I think when I see absolutely nothing wrong with the circumstance where something is self-evidently trapped, you choose to risk the trap because you want the reward, and the risk goes against you and you suffer the consequences. To me, that's the very essence of an RPG. Make choices, face consequences.
Yeah, I like the way you put it, is that you know there's a risk and you take the risk. My issue with save or die has always been the you don't know there's a risk and all of a sudden you're being told, yeah, roll a d20. What'd you roll? 7?
Yes.
Yeah, all right, you're dead. All right, so and let's move on. That to me has always felt really really shitty.
Right. I mean, because there's no choice involved if you don't know what the potential consequences are, even on a probabilistic level. At that point, your choice is actually an illusion, and you're flipping a coin. Door number one, door number two. It would be no different than saying, well, at the start of every session, roll percentile dice, and in an 01, your character dies of a heart attack from the stress. Like, okay, I mean, sure, that happens in real life, but that doesn't create any agency in the game.
No.
So
No. All right. That's you worded that very well. I like the way you placed that.
I'm actually, I'll mention while we're doing this, I'm in the middle of publishing a book called Arbiter of Worlds, which is my theory of game mastering, where I go into all of this in great detail. So when I get that released, I'll certainly let you know. And I think folks within the old school community will really like it, and I think folks within the story game community will declare me an apostate and a pariah and send out death squads from Venezuela.
Oh, heretic! You're a heretic.
Oh yeah. I mean, it's essentially the book is kind of almost a semi-rebuttal of the entire notion of story games and a defense of classic sandbox old school game mastering.
All right, I'm looking forward to this. What's the ETA approximately on this one?
Book's written, so it's just in layout. So I figure probably next month it'll be out.
All right. Well, as I've told others, make sure you ping me when it comes out, because I definitely want to post about it. And I definitely want to grab a copy. All right.
Absolutely.
Last question before we do our hex crawl. What would the teenage you think if they could see what you have accomplished in a hobby at this point in your life?
Well, the teenage me was kind of an arrogant jackass, so he would be very disappointed in me. I distinctly remember the teenage me thinking that, that I wanted to be able to look myself up in the Encyclopedia Britannica and see how important I was. And I was gravely disappointed to discover as an adult that A, no one looks up shit in the Encyclopedia Britannica anymore,
Nope.
and B, I didn't even make it to Wikipedia. So I guess all I can really do is look back at my teenage self and say I'm really sorry for squandering my gifts, and hopefully in the next life I'll be a warlord or something more impressive.
I have not made it to Wikipedia, although a link from Tenkar's Tavern did make it, I think, into the Serenity RPG listing.
So, very nice, very nice.
So yeah, so I mean, all right. So I guess if you blog for like 9.5, nearly 10 years, you might actually land some peripheral way in Wikipedia.
I mean, heck, man, I won 6 Webby Awards with The Escapist, and have no Wikipedia entry. So
really,
oh yeah. I have a whole ton of interesting stuff I did in my prior life, but there's various ins and outs of why one gets on Wikipedia, and frankly, I'm probably better off not being on there at this point.
Yeah, I love that. I think that goes for a lot of us. Wikipedia. Listen, they all just. Oh, God forbid, I'm going to get into this conversation as we hit the sandbox. It's just like the Ennies. The Ennies are self-selecting anyway, because you have to submit your own product. In some cases, mail it worldwide just to be considered for an Ennie, which really means that it's not judging the best. It's the best of the people who could afford to send stuff worldwide. And then you still have, and then you still have to meet the social media approval of judges who may not judge the product, but may judge the publisher, good or bad. I think like a lot of the Paizo stuff. I'm not saying it's poor; it's well done, but I think a lot of the Paizo stuff and historically a lot of the Witches of the Coast stuff gets pushed through because look who's submitting it. Whereas some third-party publisher or some indie publisher might put out something that's really great, they're not going to be able to have even the social connections to get themselves to the final 5, just so people can vote on them. So
I absolutely agree. Um, but I mean, that's just, I think, the nature now of our highly interconnected social society, where everything is in part a popularity contest, and in part a first mover contest. There was a really fascinating study I read, a paper about, where some scientists created a social network with music on it, and they put the music from a variety of musicians, and before they released the social network, they had experts in the field rate the songs and give them reviews as to which were the very best songs, which were moderate, and which were not very good songs. And then they released the social media site, and they had the users review the songs. And initially, the users couldn't see other users' reviews, and they found that the user reviews closely matched expert opinion in terms of which were the best and which were the worst. They then, as the control, they then did a version of the social network, same exact situation, but now you could see what other songs had been listened to most and what other ratings were. And they found that you then had all of a sudden this massive effect of the first mover. Like, if the first guy to visit the site happened to like jazz a little bit more than rock, then all of a sudden, this exponentially would end up with jazz songs being much more highly rated than they had been in the prior system. Like, there's a first follower effect. It was really fascinating, and it really made me realize just how important those viral networks are to succeeding in any type of marketing.
Yeah, I mean that is very interesting, and it also shows that it's the initial input that almost matters most, right? If you're
That's
going
right.
to do so, if you did it blind, people are voting with their own mind, their own hearts. But once it is now, well, John Smith like this,
Yep.
so it should be good. I got to go along with John Smith on this one. Of
Yep.
course,
Yep.
I might think when I think John Smith now, I'm thinking Man in a High Castle, and I don't know if that's John Smith you actually want to vote with, but in any case.
Yeah, no, I think that's just right. And what they found is that, sort of across three tiers of quality, of high quality, medium quality, is that the network effect could cause a medium quality product to do better than any high quality product, and a high quality product to do as bad as a medium quality product. What the effect couldn't do is it couldn't turn shit into gold,
Okay,
but it could turn bronze into gold and gold into bronze.
which is very interesting.
Right.
So it's almost like North Texas, they have an award, the Three Castles Award, and it isn't a popularity contest. Now, it has 4 to 5 judges, and there are submissions from publishers, third-party publishers. It's all OSR stuff, and these judges then all vote on each individual item, and then the number one, there's only one winner, it gets the yearly trophy. Now that takes the popularity contest, and it takes um the me first vote, trend setting vote out of it. But it does mean that, well, all you need is 1 out of 4 to hate your fucking guts to tank an otherwise good product. I'm not saying that's what has ever happened. I'm just saying theoretically it could happen. So there's pros and cons to both, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Um,
I mean, I've done. You can talk with like Vince on this. I mean, Vince Florio talked about this years ago, and I talked about this with James Spahn and even Wenger Santanis. I don't know, a year and a half ago, about how we could, yeah, but how we could find a way to get an industry award geared toward the OSR, but have it be something that wasn't a popularity contest and yet wasn't subject to personal whims when it comes to uh, making those picking to quote the winners. And it's I'm not saying it's impossible, but it sure fucking seems like it. I mean, it just.
Yeah, I think it's very tough to accomplish. Uh, probably the closest you can get is when you have kind of a highly respected jury that's able to deliberate in secret, and that will at least give you high quality. Something the way something similar to how the Nobel Prizes are issued, and they do a pretty good job. Um, Keeping themselves immunized from too much campaigning. But you do get institutional biases then, right? Like particular judges that favor, like if you stack your judges with OSR fans, no story games are going to win, etc.
Right. And I said, when we were talking about, you know, uh, an award system that would be OSR focused, because
Right.
that's where, the people I spoke with, and then where I hang my hat. And we often see things like N World and the Ennies, which is it's a popularity contest once you get down to those last five, and it's who can mobilize their social media the most. For a lot of it, James Raggy apparently has figured out the way to make the system work for him. God bless, but it's hard for others to achieve such. And when you can't trust the system, it kind of makes the actual award seem less valuable, at least in my eyes as a consumer. I'm sure as a publisher, getting gold or getting silver is awesome, but as a consumer, I look at it less because I've seen a lot of these votes have gone, and I scratch my head and wonder why.
We know what's interesting. There's a second paper that kind of builds on the first I shared with you, and it follows logically from the prior one. But if you consider that for any given set of products or talents or people, that the number of very top quality X is always much less than the number of average X. And then when you realize that there's these random network effects that can cause average to outperform the very best, this paper mathematically shows that in fact, the most popular, the best selling, the most well rewarded, the most sales, et cetera, is mathematically exceptionally unlikely to be the highest quality product, simply because the highest quality is so rare that the chance of it being the one that benefits from the network effects is just exceptionally unlikely. So the odds are that the winners are probably, pretty good, but not necessarily the best of the best, just because the best of the best ends up so rare. It's really fascinating math.
That is really interesting, to tell you the truth. That and it makes sense though. It really does. And social networking, the influencer that influences others, is very important. If you can get an influencer to go along with what you're trying to sell, you've guaranteed yourself sales.
That's right. That's right. So, yeah, I wish I had been able to turn this theoretical knowledge into some sort of systematic marketing mastery. But obviously, practitioners like Raghi and Zach have far outperformed me in that regard. So
Well,
I certainly admire their marketing acumen very much.
James has Finland's money, which got him started. He got a free business loan or grant, which was great. And Raggy's had some pretty, he's doing. Raggy takes chances, and he's done things that I've told him when he asked my opinion. I've said this before. I told him it was pretty much fucking retarded to run 12 concurrent Kickstarters, because your children are going to eat their own when it comes to the money you're going to take in, and you'll be lucky to see 2 or 3 fund. And I think 4 funded maybe when he did that. We don't talk anymore after that, but he has learned. He's somebody who will learn from his mistakes. He might not admit to them, but he certainly will learn from them. And he puts out high quality, visually appealing products that, for the most part, I can't use in a campaign because they're total party fucks, but they are generally a good read and they are eye pleasing. Just unusable. Did I say that?
Yeah, I think there's a whole market, if we're being honest, for tabletop gaming products that are meant to be read and enjoyed aesthetically and not actually used. Um, beautiful art, wonderful story, compelling ideas, and as you read them, you imagine what it would be like to play them, but you don't actually ever play them because it would fuck up your whole campaign, or it would require starting something fresh, or it's just too bizarre to figure out how to introduce. But a lot of those products do really, really well. Like I think Numenera, for instance, has been very, very successful, but I think its sales are disproportionate to the actual number of people that play Numenera. But I think a lot of people just think the setting is awesome and the art is awesome and they support it. But you don't run into at the local game store Numenera groups, for instance.
No, although I do know at least one Catholic priest that has run Numenera with his gaming group. But my issue with Numenera is when I got the book from the Kickstarter, is that I just couldn't read the page. It was too much going on behind the print, and that's one of my biggest gripes. I actually had a friend of mine who is pretty good at manipulating PDFs to remove the offending art from behind my text on my PDF, so I could actually get an
The
idea.
worst game I ever had in that regard was the old Mayfair Games Chill rulebook, where they
Oh
did
my
these.
God! I threw that one out. It was
You
so
you know what I'm
annoying.
talking about, right?
Yes.
Where the text was illegible. Like the graphic designer should have been fed to werewolves, frankly.
Oh my God! Yeah, I literally threw that book out, and I took out the old Pacesetter version of Chill. And I
Yep.
was like, I can read this. This is fine. And this was I'm 51. I probably threw that book out when I was 40. I just couldn't keep it anymore. I was like, I can't read it. And
Okay, so you're about 8 years older than me. I think that's why you probably had trouble finding a cyberpunk group, because the cyberpunk genre hit its popularity just as I was at my peak gaming.
Okay. Yeah.
College years. Yeah.
Yeah. The closest we got to cyberpunk was Rifts. And I was happy with that because I wasn't the GM, so I got to play. But I was also the asshole that didn't want to play a Glitter Boy or any of that stuff, or Dog Soldier. I always wanted to play like the Crazy or the Vagabond, which meant that I always got killed real quickly because I didn't have MDC armor. I digress.
Yep. Yep. I ran a short-lived Rifts campaign with I think it was like a Glitter Boy, a Juicer, and a couple other characters, and it just all went really, really badly when they all murdered each other. And I was like, all right, well, good game, guys.
Yeah. Listen. My one Gen Con that I went to, which was probably I think 93 or 94, my copy of Rifts is actually signed by Kevin Sambita, Kevin Long, and a few others that were at the table at the time. So I cherish the book and I love the setting. The system itself is broken, but if you're a Palladium fan, you don't care about that. You just you fix at the table, I guess.
That's right. Well, I ran Robotech recently, and I bought all of the Palladium Robotech supplements, but I then reskinned the whole thing into the R. Telsorian's Mechton system, and
Oh, okay.
rebuilt all the mechs in Mechton, which is similar to the Cyberpunk system, and and hacked the heck out of it. But we had a great time. So it's kind of like we were saying, the Palladium books I think are great for supplements and lore. But you'd really have to twist my arm to make me run the system itself.
Oh yeah, I love the Palladium Fantasy RPG's setting. I love the races, the
Yeah.
Wolfen,
Yep.
spot on.
Yep.
But the system itself is just a real bad house version of basic / AD&D hobbled together by somebody who probably didn't know the rules fully when they initially did it. But
Yeah, exactly.
now, since we're talking about stuff from other publishers, Alex, what do you have coming up besides your game mastery book?
Oh man, ton of product this year. Starting in May of last year, I began working on Autarch full time, and that transition took a bit to get up to steam. I had to go back and revise a bunch of older products that had been neglected. I had to catch up on some back issues of Axioms, etc. But here's what we've got coming. We have Arbiter of Worlds, which is my GMing book. Then have partnered with Simon Forster, who did Book of Layers and who did all the maps for layers and encounters. And he and I have co-written an adventure called Ruined City of Sifendir, which is set in our Arn Empire setting.
Nice.
Courtney Camp.
Simon does. By the way, Simon does great work. I have his releases.
He's great.
He packs a lot of gameplay into very little pages. So I'm looking forward to seeing what you put together.
Yes, he does. Then Courtney Campbell has created a product called Eyrie of the Dread Eye, which is also set in the Arn Empire. But it has sort of brought in his kind of maniacal gonzo-ness a little bit into the world, and I think it's going to be really flavorful and fun.
Yeah, Courtney's always got some interesting stuff to put out. I've been following his stuff for years.
Yep. Then we have a new freelancer named Mike, who hasn't decided what his official designer last name is going to be yet. I'm just calling him Mike in order to protect the innocent. But
or the guilty.
Or the guilty. But he's doing Sepulchre of the Sorceress Queen, which is another adventure set in the Arn Empire. Then we have Secrets of the Nether City, which is our mega dungeon, or kilo dungeon, really. We have Capital of the Borderlands, which is a provincial gazetteer and city gazetteer. And then after those come out, there's going to be Araxa Meraki's Almanac of Unusual Magic, which is a supplement that has all sorts of wacky new options for spellcasters. Like one of them is actually Star Trek engineering as a spellcasting, right? So it's like, you're Spock and you're accidentally on a fantasy world and you're using your technology and it seems like magic, stuff like that. So it's that's going to be a super wacky, fun book. And then, in a longer time horizon, I'm working on a couple new games and exploring a revision of ACKS to bring ACKS to a second edition. The game's been out 8 years now, so it's probably about time. Labyrinth Lord has had a second edition. The Stars Without Number has had an edition. Dungeons & Dragons has had an edition. So feels plausible to do ACKS 2.0 or, ACKS Legendary Edition or something.
Nice. Damn, I didn't realize it's been out for 8 years already.
Yeah. The core book came out in 2000, got kickstarted in 2011, and then I've done one book a year since then. So Adventure Conquer King System, Player's Companion, Dwemermount, Domains at War, Sinister Stone of Sakara, Layers and Encounters, Heroic Fantasy Handbook, and now Secrets of the Nether City.
Wow.
Yeah. So I'm going from one product a year to like 6 this year. So it's been a busy time.
You ain't kidding. And I'm looking back now and I'm like, wow. ACKS 8 years ago, because I've interviewed people on this podcast and they'll be like, yeah, and I use this system. I don't remember which of the OSR RPGs I found it in, but it's like you flip over the body and I'm like, I know exactly what he's talking about. I know exactly where you found it. You found it in ACKS because he's talking exactly with the recovering your you're near dead on the field, basically.
Yes. Yeah, it's been kind of fun actually watching over the last 6-7 years. A bunch of ideas that we put into ACKS have now circulated into other games, and some other game companies have used the ACKS economics as the foundation for their supplements. I release everything I write under the open game license. The only thing I restrict as product is specific to the Arn Empire, which is my home campaign world that one day I will write a Tolkien style novel in. But everything else is completely open, and I felt like, given that I was myself writing a game based on Cook and Moldvay and Menser that it would be absurd to then take the stance that other people shouldn't be able to do that on my own work. So it's just open it all up.
Well, I think the ACKS companion book, which allows you to not just have additional classes, but gives you a system where you can design additional classes. I've played with that with Swords and Wizardry. It works fine. It works like
Yep.
So.
Yeah, you just have to convert. You have to convert the attack throws and saving throws over.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I regularly use Sword and Wizardry modules with ACKS. I use Labyrinth Lord, Basic Fantasy, Lamentations of the Flame Princess. Like they're all very, very compatible. Second edition D&D is compatible. It's not till you get to third edition, and then third edition everything stops being compatible. So.
Well, when I was younger, when we were playing AD&D 2e, because 2e had to be better than first edition, but we still played the first edition adventures. I was still pulling out Temple of Elemental Evil. I was and running people through it. I was, T1, Tomb of Horrors, the Giant series, Slavers. I was still using the old adventures, and 1 and 2 had some significant differences, almost as much as basic to advanced did, but it's nothing that a number here or a number there doesn't fix. You're right. Once you hit third edition, it becomes a lot harder. I don't think you can convert fourth edition to any of the OSR games. I don't think there's
no. I really tried, because fourth edition came out right just before ACKS did, and that's the only edition of D&D I've never run a campaign in. I've run a first, a second, a 3.5, and a 5th edition campaign. I've never run a 4th edition campaign. I just couldn't bring myself to.
Yeah,
I mean, friends don't let friends run 4th edition.
Well, yeah, and I don't know 5e well enough to run it, but I'm comfortable enough with it that I would be happy to be a player in a game of 5e, because there's enough synergy, I think, between the old school rule sets and 5e that my sensibilities won't fall apart. But my sensibilities, when I bought 4e, even when I wasn't gaming, I was still buying gaming material. And 4e was where I was so glad I found the OSR, because
Same.
4e made no sense to me. And any 4e fans out there, God bless you. You found your system. It's not mine.
Yep. Yeah, I was the same. I mean, I own all the 4e books. I bought them out of loyalty. I even bought the D&D Essentials, that's sort of the second wave of 4th edition. Just because...
4.25, I guess, yeah.
4.25, yeah, just because, I feel like, look, it's a small industry. Every consumer dollar helps. And I want to make sure that, game designers get paid and the market remains. But, I couldn't bring myself to... And I couldn't bring myself to play it. So I was glad that the new direction they went for 5th edition. I think it's funny that 2nd edition Pathfinder looks like it's sort of like their 4th edition. It's very, very interesting.
Yeah, the whole Pathfinder 2e. When I look at that, and I've heard complaints from various third party publishers that they were blindsided by the announcement, but I don't think that Starfinder was the hit that they had expected or had hoped it would be. Maybe not expected. Maybe they had high hopes, but low expectations. But it wasn't going to bring in the money. And the reason why a lot of these rule sets like D&D and Pathfinder, the big rule sets, get rebooted is because you've pretty much... your markets all become owned by the third party publishers. You're not getting third-party publishers kickback, so you almost have to reboot to get new core books out there. Kind of like Mongoose rebooting Traveler after they realized the OGL was good in getting support, not probably good in getting more money to Mongoose.
Yep. I mean, and also I think it's the fact that core rules tend to outsell any other product you're going to release. Like, the ACKS core rules has outsold my next 3 books put together, to give a sense of the scale. So, to think about, okay, well, what would an ACKS 2nd edition do? For instance, I mean, it more or less would double to triple revenues for a year as that game comes out. So
Well, that's the whole thing too with these community programs on drive-through for the different RPGs. The publishers now are, the person who writes under the DM's Guild gets 50% of the sale price, and the publisher's getting 20%, and RPG Now is getting 30%. But the publisher's getting 20% just for licensing their IP
Yep.
under their program. And if you want to write under that, more power to you. But it's certainly a great deal for the publishers.
Yeah, it is.
So,
Man,
man,
I looked into it, but at the end of the day, I felt like I wanted to keep control of all of my own brands. So
yeah, I understand that completely. That's it. And I mean, like Savage Worlds just released under the community program. Now, what I found surprising by that is that I think that Pinnacle is only keeping like maybe 10% as opposed to the normal 20, or was it maybe 5? They're giving more money to the actual third-party publishers than the other community programs are. But
that's interesting. Now, I wonder if that's because is Savage Worlds open game? Because maybe it's the case that they control the game engine, and so if you want to use those third-party products, you have to buy their rules.
Well, here's the thing with Savage Worlds, as I understand it, with Pinnacle. If you are publishing on a fan site and you're distributing for free, you can do so. You don't have to license. And then they have a license that is, I guess, free for publishers to use, but your books will get reviewed. But now, if you publish under the community program, you just have to abide by their rules, but you can't use their settings. And a lot of stuff with Savage Worlds is the huge number of settings or what they call it, plot point campaigns that are out there that people might want to build off of, like Evernight and Rippers, but you can't because those are locked down.
Yeah.
So it's a little weird, but I don't see why a company like Pinnacle couldn't invest the money in putting up their own storefront and saying, you know what, hey, publish your stuff on our site under this license, and we'll give you 85%. We'll just keep 15%.
Right.
Cut out the middleman. Does drive-thru really need to be the middleman for everybody? I know it's one-stop shopping, and I don't complain because I do get referral monies from them or affiliate monies. But does it really have to be that way? If you are a publisher like Pinnacle, I think they're large enough. I think they would have been better served with their own storefront, and they could have given more money to the third parties and kept more money for themselves.
Like Steve Jackson does with its what is it, Warehouse 23?
Right. Yeah. I just throwing that out there. I've got no ill will against drive-thru. They've done fine by me over the years as a blogger and getting review copies in the past, but I just don't see why a larger publisher would necessarily, if they're going to do a program like that, you should have enough of a following where you could do that in your own backyard and cut out the middleman. Do you really need the middleman?
Yeah. I mean, it may be at this point the network effect of having everyone likes having their drive-through RPG files all in one place. It may just be the network effect is so strong that it's hard to compete. I mean, I know that for us, our sales primarily come from two channels: Kickstarter and drive-through RPG, and everything else is more or less irrelevant. Like if every game store in the country was simultaneously destroyed by crazed story gamer activists, like it wouldn't impact sales very much for us. But if drive-through RPG and Kickstarter went down, then I would be washing cars. So
yeah, no, I understand that, and that does make sense. And I guess that's why like bundle of holding, their Wizards cabinet links to drive-through, so anything that
it does. Yep.
So
yep.
I
bundle holding. Alan Varney used to write for my website, The Escapist. He was one of our feature writers for many years. So I've done a bunch of projects with Alan. He's a great guy.
Well, Alan
Alan
worked
Varney,
on.
who runs Bundle of Holding. Yeah.
Yeah, he used to work on Paranoia, and I know
Mm-hmm.
I read all his fiction novels that he put out in the Paranoia
Yep.
setting. They were fun reads. He certainly has a quirky sense of humor, but it works well. It's
He
dry,
does. He does. Yeah,
so it.
he has a good dry sense of humor. Yeah, so he used to write a bunch of feature articles for The Escapist, and so did his friend Greg Kostikian, who was the designer of the Star Wars RPG, D6 Star Wars RPG, and one of the designers of Paranoia, and also of Price of Freedom, the ultra
Oh,
right wing anti-communist RPG.
I remember that one. I didn't own that one, but I play tested. Was it Hill Sector Blues at
Uh
West
huh.
End Games when they were in Manhattan.
Yep.
You came in like from like the back of the building. I remember we were sitting on desks in their office to actually play test it. I still have my playtest material in my Paranoia box, and I have a letter from Ken Rolston when I bought my Paranoia box. I think I got it from them directly. I think I back in the day when you had to send your check in to order something.
Right.
Uh,
Right.
I didn't it didn't come with dice in the box, and you know, you needed dice. Dice were gold back then. If you got dice in a game box, it was expanding your dice collection. It's not like
Yep.
now where you can spend $20 and get a pound of dice mailed to you by Amazon. And I got a letter, and still remember this. It was printed on dot matrix, but Ken wrote it. Uh, he started out, apologizing, and then in character, the computer broke in, told me I was a traitor because the computer never makes any mistakes, and then goes back to Ken's letter, and he signed it. Needless to say, I never got dice, but I have a letter that is irreplaceable.
That's amazing. That's amazing. Um,
So,
it's funny when you think about like it would be difficult to imagine a small press tabletop game company today with full-time staff in an office in Manhattan. Like what a different world we operate in now. It's practically
oh,
inconceivable. Or like the idea that a game like Advanced Squad Leader sold 1 million copies. Like, I'm like, what happened to those 1 million people? Like, I would like to sell games to them because clearly you're very smart and you like spreadsheets, and so you're my
yeah,
target market.
apparently so, because I'm one of those 1 million people, and I bought it, and I tried to figure it out. And that was over a couple weeks in the summer spent in the Poconos. And yeah, no, I could never figure that game out. It couldn't happen.
Yeah, it's a complex game, no doubt.
Yeah, yeah, bit more than I was willing to comprehend, or I guess invest myself in at the time. Damn.
Yep.
Wow. We certainly covered a lot of ground in our little hex crawl here.
Yeah, we did. This is good. We feel like we should get experience points for exploration.
If I could award it, I would, but as I'm a participant, I probably can't.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know it sucks, but
So the
damn.
ACKS community is cheering spreadsheets in the background. We actually have a spreadsheets emoticon that we use in our server. I think it's an ongoing joke, but that's why. But next ACKS 2E is just going to be a story game. We're going to get rid of all the math, and it's just going to be tags and a D6.
Oh, and then the group votes on what happens.
Yeah, the group votes on what happens. Like, did
Okay,
we win the battle? Everyone votes yes. Oh, great. Okay.
okay. I'd like to find a magic sword behind that rock, please. No, maybe the next time I'll find a magic sword behind. I want it to be like flaming, but not hot.
Jay Davis is like, I want ACKS 2E to just be a spreadsheet. Yep, absolutely. Yeah, it's going to be, instead of a PDF with art, it's just going to be an Excel file.
Oh God, help us! For those of you listening at home, we actually have a nicely filled room of live listeners, a live show, and they're making comments in the text channel, so they are amusing us.
The dungeon maps are Excel files. Yeah, exactly.
That would be painful. Yes, we're gonna do the dungeon maps. No, and we're actually gonna you got to print them out in like the old dot matrix. Where you had to print everything out with like letters and make your maps and graphics that way. We'll do that. No.
Oh man, dot matrix printers. I remember getting that, and I just thought I was the coolest kid in town on my Commodore 64.
Oh, see, my Commodore 64, I never got a printer for, but my Coleco Atom, which was a ColecoVision with a digital audio tape drive, a basic computer thingy, and a daisy wheel printer. My God, that thing was so fucking loud it would wake up the neighbors.
Yep.
Holy shit. I don't think I really used it to do much computing of any sort. I just played ColecoVision games on it. My parents could have saved a couple $100.
Yeah. I had a ColecoVision, and then later I had a TurboGrafx, which was like an obscure console from Japan.
No, it wasn't obscure. I had two friends that had it. Oh my, TurboGrafx 16, man, that was 16-bit graphics before. That was arcade graphics for the time.
Yeah, it was awesome. And I had a Commodore 64, but for the first 3 years of the Commodore 64, I didn't have a tape drive, so I had actually no way of saving any files. So I would just type into the screen and print, and then it was gone. It was like a typewriter.
Ouch! No, that sucks. I had mine with the floppy drive, and of course my friends were all making me copies of Ultima at the time, and I played this one RPG, and God knows I still can't remember what it was called. It actually came with props in the box, so like if you were going into the dungeon and you had a certain room, it would tell you like open envelope 2, and you would.
So cool.
It was very cool. The only problem is whenever I tried to cross the river to get to the other, the larger expanse of the world, the game would always fucking crash.
Oh.
Always crash. And if you weren't around for the days of the early Apples and the early Commodores and floppy drives, crashed games weren't uncommon, but a game that crashed in the same fucking spot, oh my God, that was annoying. That was an SSI game.
Do you remember a game called the Adventure Construction Set? And it was like an RPG Maker. Would have been late Commodore era, early PC era, that let you create simple Ultima type games.
I remember reading about it, and I think I read a review in one of the computer game magazines back then. I never owned it, but I remember looking at a shelf at I guess what was it? Software Center was above B. Dalton's probably, or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And I just remember looking at that and going, I really would like this, and I never had the money to afford it.
Yeah, I had a pirated copy, and I, to my horror, the problem with the pirated copy is that you could make the games, but then you couldn't actually play the games you made with the Adventure Construction Set because I didn't have the keys to do that. And like after investing 50 hours designing my first game with it, I discovered that. And that was my 14-year-old self's lesson in don't pirate video games. Bad.
Yeah, I remember the wheels.
Oh yeah, yep.
To prevent the pirating. It's like, oh Jesus.
Yep.
Now I got it.
What I remember most are boot disks, where you used to have to put a floppy disk in the PC to tell your PC not to load the operating system so that it could instead load the game because it couldn't have both going at the same time.
Oh, God, yeah. Oh, I remember my first PC, which was a custom. I had a custom built SX33 because faster than like a 20 or a 25.
Oh yeah.
And I think my hard drive was 420 megabytes. I had to really pay extra for that. And games took forever to load because it was 5, 6, 7, 8 floppies.
Yep.
And when I got a CD drive, that was great. The only thing is, it conflicted with my modem, and I couldn't use AOL unless I uploaded GEOS.
Oh man!
Oh God, this is really. I'm having damaging flashbacks about my early computer days.
Oh, it was a totally different Like I know I sound like that grandpa who's talking about walking uphill to school both ways in the snow, but man, it really was walking uphill both ways in the snow to use a damn computer back then.
It was. I mean, my choices, if I wanted to log into something, I had two choices: at AOL, which gave you 5 hours a month, or the Fordham University Bulletin Board, which was run by Jesuits. So there wasn't anything
Yep.
exciting happening at Fordham. And now with AOL, though, my problem got fixed when I guess Windows went from, I don't know, whatever shitty version of Windows was, probably just like 3.0. It fixed a lot of outstanding issues. But oh no, actually, when I got 3.0 Windows, it fixed the issues with DOS.
Oh yeah, of course.
But I learned a trick with AOL. Again, for you folks that don't know what limited internet is, think 5 hours in a month. You can't even grab your emails in that time. But if you went to their members helping members section, members helping members was not timed. But if you were there and you left it, I forget from what section you had to leave it from, you had about a 50-50 chance of not kicking the timer back in. And you knew if the timer came back on or not. So when the timer didn't kick back in, now I could go all over AOL and read news stories and play shitty games.
Yep.
But yeah, and then when they gave you 10 hours and then 20, you were like, oh, it's heaven.
I didn't get internet access till I went to college, where we had Gopher and Lynx, which was pre-graphical web browsers to access the World Wide Web.
Wow.
And then I remember the first time I used Mosaic, which was the first graphical web browser, and I was like, "This is incredible! There's pictures on the internet."
It's like, hey, I can download stuff off the internet. How there's these groups you can go into, and
yep,
it'll take you 95 minutes to download. God, picture of a fucking cat, but you could do it.
You could do it, yeah. Set up your downloads, go to bed, wake up in the morning, be like, oh, cool, I got this file. It used up my entire hard drive. Okay.
That was also like, a little bit later when I was playing EverQuest, we were still all on dial-up. I had friends that were installing second lines just so we could call one person, but you couldn't call everybody.
Yep.
And then they came out with the first expansion for EverQuest, which my graphics card couldn't run, so I was about 2 months paying for a subscription that I couldn't use because the game updated to graphics that I couldn't push through until I bought a new graphics card. Oh my God.
Speaking of technology, one of the things I think about is that it was so much harder to organize a Dungeons and Dragons group before there were cell phones and the internet.
Oh, yeah.
If Jim didn't come to the session at 7, you're just like, where's Jim? I don't know. We have no way of getting in touch with him. Do you think he'll come? I don't know. If someone didn't remember where the session was, he had no way of finding out. Like, it was just, you had to be like a logistics genius to get 8 people in the same location at the same time.
Yeah. I mean, we could do that in high school and college because it was basically, oh, we got a free data game. And my house was the default house because my mother was always very, very nice and would make the iced tea and, finger sandwiches or whatever. So her whole thought was, I'd rather have them here playing D&D and breaking the dining room furniture in their excitement as they bounce around too much and chairs slowly sink to the floor than have them outside getting in trouble. So.
Yeah, absolutely. That was my parents' attitude as well with regard to role-playing games. Like, our son's a little weird, but at least he's not off doing drugs and whatnot.
Exactly. Wow. Well, Alex, I think we've now, officially, it's the longest episode yet.
Awesome.
And we could keep doing this, man. We'll probably have to do this again just because it's a lot of fun.
Absolutely. I'd be happy to come back anytime you've got a slot.
Pex is listening, and I'm sure Pex is already like going, "Oh, okay, let me get the spreadsheet out." And
Right.
so,
yeah, Peck should really play ACKS with the way he likes spreadsheets.
no, he's good at it, and I have learned I am not good at spreadsheets because I can look at a spreadsheet and it doesn't tell me shit. I mean, it tells me stuff, but I don't visualize it. So now I have like one of those like year-long daily planner books that you put in your pocket, and I'm like, now I can write out all this stuff, and holy shit, I'm busy. Didn't seem like it until I actually wrote it out. But yeah, Pex is if chaotic evil is disorganized, that would be me. Pex is lawful good.
There you go.
Somehow in the middle, we're like true neutral.
Yep.
But Alex, thank you very much for joining. Everybody that's listening live, thank you for joining us. Really appreciate it. I've been reading the comments as we've been doing this, and as my niece has been known to tell me, Uncle, how can you not laugh at certain stuff? I was a cop for 20 years. I've learned to keep laughter in when I need to, but man, you guys were fucking hilarious. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Dude, thank you for joining. I really appreciate it. Home run. All right, folks, on that note, we're going to bid you all adieu. As always, God bless, roll your dice well, and I will talk with you all tomorrow, assuming that, Craig Bot lets me leave this time. Let's see.